The summer of 1887 brought with it a heat that seemed to bake the very soul out of Millbrook, Texas. A dusty frontier town where dreams came to die and fortunes were lost as quickly as they were made. It was on such a scorching day, when even the buzzards sought shade, that 17-year-old Clara May Whitmore found herself standing on the weathered wooden auction block in the town square, her hands trembling, not from the merciless sun beating down on her auburn hair, but from the devastating realization that her own flesh and blood had put her there like a piece of unwanted livestock. The auctioneer, a portly man named Jeremiah Hawkins, who had sold everything from cattle to furniture in his 30 years of business, cleared his throat and began his practice spiel. His voice boomed across the gathered crowd of ranchers, drifters, and opportunists, describing Clara as if she were prime breeding stock. Young, strong, with good teeth and wide hips suitable for bearing children, capable of managing a household and educated enough to read and write, which was more than most women in these parts could claim. Her father, Samuel Whitmore, stood in the crowd with his new wife, Delilah, a painted woman half his age, who had convinced him that Clara was nothing but a burden and a reminder of his deceased first wife. Samuel avoided Clara's desperate, pleading gaze, as bidders called out prices for her future, each number representing years of servitude or worse. The debt collectors from the Silver Dollar Saloon had given him an ultimatum that morning: pay the $300 he owed from his gambling debts, or surrender his daughter to settle the account. Without hesitation, without even a moment's consideration for the girl who had cared for him through his drinking binges and nursed him through his illnesses, he had chosen the latter. Clara remembered the exact moment when her world had shattered, when Samuel had looked her in the eye and said, "You're old enough to make your own way now, girl. Time you learned that life ain't fair to nobody." As Clara stood there in her faded blue dress, the only decent piece of clothing she owned, carefully mended and remended over the years, she felt the crushing weight of abandonment settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. The crowd murmured and pointed, some with genuine pity in their eyes, others with the cold calculation of men seeking a bargain on what they saw as free labor and companionship. She could hear their whispered comments, speculation about her virtue, her work ethic, her potential value as a wife or servant. The humiliation burned hotter than the Texas sun, but Clara forced herself to stand straight, to keep her chin raised in defiance, even as her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. But before I continue with Clara's incredible journey from abandonment to triumph, from auction block to the heights of respect and power, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more amazing stories like Clara's. Now, back to this remarkable tale of resilience and love. Among the crowd of potential buyers stood a figure that commanded both respect and fear throughout 3 counties: Jake "Iron Fist" Morrison, the most successful and ruthlessly efficient rancher in all of Texas. At 32 years old, he had built a cattle empire from absolutely nothing, starting as an orphaned boy who had worked his way up from stable hand to ranch hand to foreman, and finally to owner of the largest spread in the territory. His reputation for being unforgiving in business dealings was matched only by the whispered stories about his mysterious past. Some said he had killed a man in a gunfight in Abilene. Others claimed he had been a Texas Ranger who had seen too much violence and retreated to the isolation of ranch life. What everyone agreed on was that Jake Morrison was not a man to be crossed, and when he set his mind on something, he usually got it. His dark eyes, the color of storm clouds before a tornado, surveyed the auction scene with the same calculating intensity he used to evaluate prize bulls at cattle shows. He had come to town for supplies and had no intention of participating in what he considered a barbaric spectacle. But when those steel-gray eyes fell upon Clara, something fundamental shifted inside him. Perhaps it was the defiant tilt of her chin, despite her desperate circumstances, or the way she refused to let tears fall, even as her world crumbled around her like a house of cards in a windstorm. Maybe it was whatever it was, Jake Morrison found himself studying this young woman with an interest that surprised him. When the bidding reached $50, a sum that would have fed a working family for 3 months, Jake's deep voice cut through the crowd like a cavalry saber through silk. $100, he declared, his tone carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. The crowd fell into stunned silence, knowing better than to challenge Iron Fist Morrison when he had clearly set his mind on something. Even the auctioneer paused, his hammer halfway to the block, uncertain whether he had heard correctly. $100 was more money than most of these men saw in a year, and for Jake to offer it so casually spoke to both his wealth and his determination. Clara's heart pounded like a war drum as she realized her fate was being decided by a man whose very name struck fear into the hearts of grown men throughout the territory. The transaction was completed with the cold, mechanical efficiency of any other business deal. Money changed hands, papers were signed, and Clara May Whitmore officially became the property of Jake Morrison, though neither of them fully understood what that would mean for their futures. Jake approached the platform where Clara still stood, her legs barely supporting her weight, as the reality of her situation crashed over her like a flash flood in the desert. Up close, she could see the weathered lines around his steel-gray eyes, the result of years spent under the unforgiving Texas sun and the weight of responsibilities that would have crushed lesser men. His presence was overwhelming. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical labor, and hands that looked capable of both building a ranch from nothing and destroying anyone who threatened what he had built. His dark hair was streaked with premature silver at the temples, and a scar ran from his left ear to his jawline, a souvenir from some long-ago confrontation that he never spoke about. Despite his fearsome reputation, when Jake spoke to Clara, his voice carried a surprising gentleness beneath its gravelly undertone. "Miss Whitmore," he said, removing his black hat in a gesture of respect that shocked the onlookers. "I'm Jake Morrison. You'll be coming with me now, and I want you to know that you're under my protection from this moment forward." Clara found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper, her throat dry from fear and the oppressive heat. What do you expect of me, Mr. Morrison?" She had heard the stories that circulated through the territory like wildfire, tales of women who found themselves in such circumstances and simply vanished. Others who became little more than slaves, worked to death in isolated homesteads where no one would hear their cries for help. Some whispered about ranchers who collected women like livestock, keeping them in conditions that would have shamed the devil himself. Jake studied her face for a long moment, taking in the fear she was trying so hard to hide, the intelligence that sparked in her eyes despite her terror, and the stubborn pride that kept her standing straight even in her darkest hour. When he finally responded, his words carried a weight of sincerity that surprised them both. "I expect you to survive, Miss Whitmore. Everything else, your role, your future, your choices, we'll figure out as we go along. But I give you my word as a Morrison that you will be treated with respect and dignity under my roof." As they walked toward his wagon, a sturdy vehicle pulled by two magnificent black horses that were clearly worth more than most people's entire possessions, Clara caught sight of her father counting the money Jake had paid for her. Samuel Whitmore didn't even look up as his daughter was led away, too busy examining each bill to spare a glance for the child he had just sold into an uncertain future. His new wife, Delilah, stood beside him, a satisfied smirk on her painted face as she watched Clara's departure. In that moment, Clara felt something inside her heart harden like steel in a blacksmith's forge. The last vestiges of the naive girl who had believed in family loyalty and paternal love died in that dusty town square, replaced by a determination forged in betrayal and tempered by necessity. She would survive this ordeal, she promised herself, with a fierce intensity that surprised her. She would do more than merely survive. She would thrive, and someday, somehow, she would make them all see exactly what they had thrown away, like yesterday's garbage. The ride to the Morrison Ranch took nearly 4 hours through the vast Texas countryside, past rolling hills covered in mesquite and prickly pear cactus, through valleys where longhorn cattle grazed under the watchful eyes of mounted cowboys, and across streams that ran clear and cold despite the summer heat. Jake said little during the journey, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her about the dangers of rattlesnakes in certain rocky areas. But Clara used the time wisely, studying her new surroundings with the keen eye of someone whose survival might depend on such knowledge. She observed the way Jake handled the horses with firm but gentle hands, noted the respect with which passing cowboys tipped their hats to him, and began to form her first impressions of the man who now controlled her destiny. The Morrison Ranch, when it finally came into view as they crested a hill overlooking the valley, was unlike anything Clara had expected from the stories she had heard about frontier homesteads. Sprawling across what appeared to be thousands of acres of prime grazing land, it was a testament to Jake's success, determination, and vision for the future. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure built from local limestone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides and provided shade during the brutal summer months. Outbuildings dotted the landscape like a small town, massive barns that could house hundreds of cattle during harsh weather, bunkhouses for the ranch hands, corrals and training pens for horses, workshops for blacksmithing and leatherwork, and even a small schoolhouse that Jake had built for the children of his workers. Cowboys moved about their duties with the smooth efficiency of a well-oiled machine, and Clara noticed how they all tipped their hats respectfully when Jake passed, their body language speaking of genuine respect rather than mere fear. "This is your home now," Jake said, as he helped her down from the wagon, his large hands spanning her waist as he lifted her to the ground with surprising gentleness. His touch was firm, but not rough, and Clara found herself surprised by his consideration for her comfort and dignity. "Maria will show you to your room and explain how things work around here. She's been with me since I first bought this land, and there's no one I trust more to help you find your place." Maria Gonzalez, the ranch's head housekeeper and cook, was a woman in her 50s with kind brown eyes, graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and a no-nonsense attitude that had served her well in managing a household full of rough cowboys and demanding ranch operations. She had worked for Jake since he first bought the land 8 years earlier, and her loyalty to him was absolute, not because she feared him, but because she had seen the man beneath the fearsome reputation, had witnessed his fairness, his generosity to those who served him well, and his unwavering protection of those under his care. As she led Clara through the house, Maria explained the daily routines, the expectations for household management, and most importantly, the unspoken rules that governed life on the Morrison Ranch. "Senor Jake, he is a good man," Maria said, as they climbed the polished wooden stairs to the second floor, her accented English carrying the warmth of genuine affection. "But he has been hurt before. See? Betrayed by people he trusted, people who should have protected him. He does not trust easily now, and he does not speak of his past to anyone. You would be wise to remember this, Nina. Earn his trust slowly, with actions rather than words, and you will find no better protector in all of Texas." Clara's room was larger and more luxurious than any space she had ever called her own in her 17 years of life. It contained a real bed with a carved wooden headboard and clean white linens that smelled of lavender, a washstand with a porcelain basin and a mirror that wasn't cracked, a wardrobe for clothes she didn't yet own, and even a small writing desk positioned by the window that looked out over the vast expanse of the ranch. For someone who had spent her entire life sleeping on a straw mattress in a cramped cabin with her father and stepmother, sharing space with mice and enduring the constant smell of unwashed bodies and stale whiskey, it felt like luxury beyond her wildest imagination. That first evening, Clara joined Jake and Maria for dinner in the ranch house's formal dining room, a space that spoke of prosperity and refined taste despite its frontier setting. The table was set with real china and silver cutlery, and the meal was simple but hearty. Beef stew made from the ranch's own cattle, fresh bread baked that morning, vegetables from Maria's carefully tended garden, and coffee that was actually hot and strong rather than the weak, bitter brew she was accustomed to. Jake ate in contemplative silence for the most part, but Clara caught him watching her with those penetrating gray eyes, studying her reactions, her manners, her responses to this new environment. Finally, after they had finished the main course, he spoke in his deep, measured voice. "I want to make something clear from the start, Miss Whitmore. You're not a servant in this house, and you're certainly not a prisoner. You're under my protection, and that means something significant on this ranch. It means that anyone who mistreats you or shows you disrespect will answer to me personally. But I also expect you to earn your keep and contribute to the success of this operation. Maria will teach you what you need to know about running a household of this size, managing supplies and schedules, and you'll help with the ranch's financial records. I noticed during our conversation that you can read and write quite well, which is more than most folks in these parts can claim." Clara nodded, finding her voice and surprised by the steadiness she heard in it. "I appreciate your kindness and protection, Mr. Morrison. I promise you won't regret your investment in me, and I won't be a burden to you or your operation." "See that you're not," he replied, but there was no harshness in his tone, only the matter-of-fact directness of a man accustomed to clear expectations and honest communication. Over the following weeks, Clara threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life, with the desperate intensity of someone who understood that her survival and future depended on proving her worth. Maria became both teacher and friend, patiently showing her how to manage the complex household accounts, plan nutritious meals for 30 hungry cowboys, coordinate the various activities that kept the ranch running smoothly, and maintain the delicate balance between authority and approachability that was essential for managing such a diverse group of workers. Clara discovered she had a natural aptitude for organization and numbers, skills that had been completely wasted in her father's chaotic household, but proved invaluable in the structured environment of the Morrison Ranch. The cowboys, initially skeptical and somewhat resentful of the young woman who had arrived under such unusual and potentially scandalous circumstances, gradually came to respect her competence, work ethic, and genuine concern for their welfare. She learned all their names within the first week, remembered their individual preferences for meals and work assignments, treated them with a dignity and respect that many had never experienced from someone of higher social standing, and proved that she was willing to work just as hard as anyone else to ensure the ranch's success. Word of her fairness, intelligence, and tireless dedication spread throughout the ranch like wildfire, and soon even the most grizzled veterans were tipping their hats respectfully and asking for her opinion on various matters ranging from supply purchases to work schedules. Jake watched this remarkable transformation with growing interest and something that might have been admiration, though he was careful not to let his feelings show too openly. Clara was proving to be far more than he had bargained for when he made that impulsive bid at the auction. She had a sharp mind for business that rivaled his own, a natural ability to manage people that came from genuine empathy rather than fear or manipulation, and a strength of character that impressed him more with each passing day. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations about ranch business, and gradually those discussions began to extend beyond mere operational matters to include books, dreams, philosophy, and their hopes for the future. But it was during a crisis in late autumn that Clara truly proved her worth and established herself as an indispensable part of the ranch's success. A sudden early blizzard, the kind that could kill cattle and men with equal efficiency, had swept down from the north without warning, trapping nearly half the herd in a distant pasture and cutting off communication with several cowboys who had been working in the remote areas of the ranch. Jake was preparing to lead a dangerous rescue party into the storm when Clara approached him with a detailed plan she had worked out using her growing knowledge of the ranch's layout, the weather patterns Maria had taught her about, and her careful study of the maps and records Jake kept in his office. "Mr. Jake Morrison," she said, her voice steady and confident despite the gravity of the situation and the howling wind that rattled the windows. "I've been studying the maps and talking to the men who know those distant pastures best. If you take the main trail like you're planning, you'll be fighting the wind and snow the entire way, and it'll take you at least 6 hours to reach the trapped herd. But there's an old cattle path that runs along the eastern ridge. It's more sheltered from the worst of the storm, and according to my calculations, it'll cut your travel time in half." Jake studied the map she had marked, with careful notations, his respect for her analytical mind growing by the minute. The route she had identified was indeed shorter and more protected, but it was also treacherous under the best of conditions. "This path here," he said, pointing to a section she had highlighted in red ink. "It's dangerous even in good weather, with loose rocks and narrow passages. In a blizzard like this—" "I know the risks," Clara interrupted, then immediately caught herself and colored slightly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak out of turn or question your judgment." But I also know that Tommy Rodriguez grew up in those hills before he came to work for you. And he says the path is passable if you know exactly where to watch for loose rocks and ice formations. And, Mr. Morrison, those men are counting on you to bring them home safely. Sometimes the dangerous path is the only one that leads where you need to go. Jake looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the frightened, abandoned girl who had stood on the auction block just months earlier, but a woman of courage, intelligence, and sound judgment who had earned her place at his side through dedication and competence. "You're absolutely right," he said finally, rolling up the map with decisive movements. "We'll take your route, and I want you to brief Tommy on the specific landmarks you've identified." The rescue mission was a complete success, and when Jake returned 18 hours later, with all the missing men and most of the cattle safely accounted for, the story of Clara's crucial contributions spread throughout the county like wildfire. She had proven herself not just as a capable household manager, but as someone whose judgment could be trusted in life or death situations, whose quick thinking and thorough preparation had potentially saved lives and prevented devastating financial losses. As winter deepened and the ranch settled into its quieter season, with most of the cattle moved to protected valleys and the cowboys spending more time on equipment maintenance and planning for the spring roundup, Clara found herself spending increasingly long evenings with Jake in his study. What had started as purely business discussions about ranch operations, supply purchases, and financial planning gradually evolved into deeper conversations about literature, philosophy, dreams for the future, and the experiences that had shaped them both into the people they had become. Clara discovered that beneath Jake's tough, intimidating exterior lay a man of surprising depth, intelligence, and sensitivity. He had taught himself to read as an adult, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge and self-improvement, and he devoured every book he could acquire, from classical literature to modern agricultural techniques to philosophical treatises on human nature and society. His insights into people and situations were as sharp as his business acumen, and Clara found herself challenged intellectually in ways she had never experienced before. Jake, for his part, found himself drawn to Clara's quick wit, her unwavering moral compass, and her ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. She challenged his decisions and assumptions, not out of disrespect or rebellion, but from a genuine desire to understand his reasoning and contribute to better outcomes. When she disagreed with him, which happened more frequently as she grew more confident in her role, she did so thoughtfully and with well-reasoned arguments that forced him to reconsider his positions and often led to better decisions than he would have made alone. One particularly cold evening in December, as they sat by the crackling fireplace in his study, reviewing the year's financial records and planning for the challenges and opportunities that the coming year would bring, Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The numbers spread before them told a story of remarkable success. The ranch had not only survived, but thrived under their joint management, with profits exceeding even Jake's optimistic projections and the operation running more smoothly than it ever had before. "Clara," he said, using her first name for the first time since she had arrived at the ranch, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that made her look up from the ledger she had been studying. "I have a proposition for you, and I want you to consider it carefully before you give me an answer." She set down her pen and turned to face him fully, her heart suddenly racing at the serious, almost vulnerable tone in his voice. In the months she had been at the ranch, she had seen Jake confident, angry, determined, and thoughtful, but she had never seen him uncertain or nervous. "I'm listening, Mr. Morrison." "Jake," he corrected gently, "I think we've moved well past formalities, don't you?" When she nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth, he continued with the careful deliberation of a man who understood the magnitude of what he was about to propose. "This ranch needs a woman's touch, not just in managing the household, but in the business itself. You've proven beyond any doubt that you have the skills, the judgment, and the vision to be a true partner in this operation. More than that, you've shown me what it means to have someone I can trust completely. Someone who challenges me to be better than I am. Someone who makes me want to build something that will last long after we're both gone." He paused, running his hand through his dark hair in a gesture of nervousness that Clara had never seen from him before. "I'm asking you to marry me, Clara. Not out of pity or obligation or convenience, but because I believe we could build something truly remarkable together. Not just a successful ranch, but a partnership, a family, a legacy that would make us both proud." Clara felt the world shift around her, like the earth moving during an earthquake. 6 months ago, she had been sold like livestock by her own father, abandoned and humiliated in front of an entire town. Now, the most powerful and respected man in 3 counties was asking her to be his equal partner in life and business, offering her not just security, but genuine partnership, and, if she was reading the emotion in his eyes correctly, love. "Jake," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "are you certain about this? Marriage is not a business arrangement that can be dissolved if it proves unprofitable or inconvenient. It's a commitment that should last a lifetime, through good times and bad, through success and failure. I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life," he replied, reaching across the table to take her hand in both of his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not offering you a contract or a business arrangement, Clara. I'm offering you my heart, my name, my complete trust, and my promise that you'll never again have to depend on anyone's charity or mercy or whims. You'll be my wife, my partner in every sense of the word, and if you'll have me, the mother of my children and the co-builder of our shared future." Tears that Clara had held back for months, tears of grief for her lost family, of fear for her uncertain future, of loneliness in her new life, finally spilled over. But they were tears of joy and relief and overwhelming gratitude rather than sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger and more confident. "Yes, Jake Morrison, I'll marry you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." The wedding took place on a crisp January morning in 1888, with the entire ranch community in attendance, along with neighbors from throughout the county who had come to witness what many considered the most significant social event in the territory's recent history. Clara wore a dress that Maria had helped her design and sew from the finest ivory silk that Jake could order from San Antonio, a creation with delicate lace trim, pearl buttons, and a train that transformed her from the frightened girl who had stood on the auction block into a radiant bride who commanded respect and admiration from everyone who saw her. The ceremony was performed by the circuit preacher in the ranch's main parlor, which had been decorated with winter flowers and candles that cast a warm golden glow over the assembled guests. Cowboys and neighboring ranchers crowded into the room and spilled out onto the porch, all dressed in their finest clothes, to witness the union that had become the talk of 3 counties. As Jake slipped the gold wedding band onto Clara's finger, a ring he had commissioned from the finest jeweler in Austin. She thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of her father's betrayal would always be with her, a scar on her heart that would never completely heal. But it had led her to something she never could have imagined in her wildest dreams. A love built on mutual respect, shared dreams, genuine partnership, and the unshakable foundation of two people who had chosen each other freely and completely. The reception that followed was a celebration that lasted well into the night. With music provided by a fiddle band Jake had hired from San Antonio, dancing that continued until dawn, and enough food to feed half the county. Clara moved through the crowd as the undisputed lady of the manor, graciously accepting congratulations and good wishes while already making mental notes about improvements she wanted to implement for the ranch and the surrounding community. She had found her place in the world, and she intended to make the most of every opportunity it presented. In the months and years that followed, Clara threw herself into her new role with the same determination and intelligence that had helped her survive the auction block and earn Jake's respect. She expanded the ranch's operations significantly, establishing new trade relationships with buyers in Kansas City and Chicago, implementing innovative cattle breeding programs that improved both the quality and quantity of their herds, and introducing modern business practices that increased profits while also improving working conditions for their employees. She started a school for the ranch children and those from surrounding homesteads, believing passionately that education was the key to building a better future for everyone in the territory. She organized medical care for the community, bringing in doctors from larger towns to provide regular checkups and emergency treatment. She even established a lending library and organized social events that brought isolated ranch families together and created a sense of community in the vast, often lonely landscape of frontier Texas. Jake watched his wife's transformation and achievements with pride, amazement, and deep love. The woman he had married was revealing new depths of capability, vision, and leadership with each passing day. Together, they were building not just a successful ranch, but a model community that other settlements throughout Texas began to emulate. Their partnership extended far beyond business. They were intellectual equals who challenged and supported each other, emotional partners who shared their deepest fears and highest aspirations, and lovers who had discovered that true intimacy came from complete trust and mutual respect. When Clara gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel, not after her father, but as a symbol of new beginnings and the fresh start they had created together, Jake held his wife and child with a tenderness that few would have believed possible from the man known throughout Texas as Iron Fist Morrison. "Thank you," he whispered to Clara as she cradled their son, exhausted but radiant with happiness and fulfillment. "For what?" she asked, looking up at him with eyes that sparkled with love and contentment. "For showing me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "For proving that love can grow from the ashes of betrayal and abandonment. For being the partner I never knew I needed, and for giving me a future I never dared to dream was possible." Clara smiled, thinking of the broken, abandoned girl who had stood on that auction block less than 3 years ago. That girl had been betrayed and humiliated, but she had also possessed a strength and resilience she didn't know she had. Now, As Clara Morrison, wife, mother, and co-owner of the most successful ranch in Texas, she had not only survived, but thrived beyond her wildest dreams. The town that had once watched her humiliation now looked to her for leadership and guidance. The family that had abandoned her had been replaced by one built on love, respect, and shared purpose. And the future that had once seemed so dark and uncertain now stretched before her, bright with infinite possibilities.